A blacked-out tanker is sliding through the Baltic at night. The AIS trail looks clean enough. The flag on the stern says one thing, the paperwork says another. Then blue lights bloom across the water. A helicopter starts circling overhead, and Swedish patrol boats come up fast on both sides. This is not a random inspection. This is a message. One small Baltic country just did what Moscow feared Europe would eventually do: put its hands directly on Russia's secret oil pipeline at sea. Today, we're breaking down how Sweden stopped Russian-linked ships in the Baltic, and why this quiet move could hit Putin's war machine harder than a missile strike. Imagine you're the captain of a sanctions-dodging tanker in the Baltic Sea. The water is dark, flat, and cold. Off to the west is the Swedish coast. Ahead is Russia. Behind you is a paper trail so messy it would make an accountant cry. You tell yourself this is just another run, another old hull, another convenient flag, another trip through a sea that has become crowded with quiet watchers, radar screens, patrol cutters, and governments that have finally stopped pretending not to notice. Then the radio crackles. The voice is Swedish, the tone is not friendly, and suddenly you realize the Baltic is not safe water anymore. It is watched water. That is the big shift here. For years, Russia's shadow fleet thrived in the grey zone between sanctions policy and actual enforcement. Everybody knew the game. Older tankers, obscure ownership chains, flags of convenience, questionable insurance, and routes designed to keep Russian oil moving while price caps and sanctions try to squeeze the Kremlin's revenue. These ships matter because oil money matters. That money helps fund the Russian state, sustain the war economy, and cushion the blow of sanctions. And these vessels are dangerous for another reason too. Many are aging hulls with weaker oversight, which means more risk of collision, spill, fire, or some other maritime disaster in one of Europe's most sensitive seas. Sweden did not invent that problem, but it is now one of the countries deciding to do something about it. No flags left to hide behind. That line matters because the whole system depends on flags, registries, and legal cover. The flag state is supposed to be the state responsible for the vessel. It is supposed to vouch for safety, registration, and basic legal identity. But if a ship is falsely flagged or effectively stateless, that protection starts to collapse. And once that happens, what looked like routine commercial traffic starts looking a lot more like a floating legal problem with an engine room. Sweden and a group of Northern European states made that point explicit in June 2025, warning that falsely flagged and stateless vessels are not entitled to the same protections under the law of the sea, and that they would take action within international law. In other words, the memo went out. Then came the boardings. The first case was the cargo ship Kafa. On March 6, 2026, Swedish authorities took control of the vessel near Trelleborg in Swedish waters. According to the Swedish Coast Guard, Kafa was sailing under a false Guinean flag, and Sweden's overall assessment was that the vessel was stateless. That is a crucial phrase, stateless, because once Swedish authorities decided the ship did not have a valid flag state standing behind it, the normal principle of innocent passage stopped shielding it. Swedish police and Coast Guard officers boarded the ship, launched an investigation into suspected lack of seaworthiness, and began gathering information on the crew, the ship, and onboard conditions. Reuters later reported that the vessel had extensive sea safety deficiencies. Most of the 11 crew were Russian, and one crew member was notified of suspected breaches of maritime law and ship safety rules. Swedish officials also said they had information that the vessel was on Ukraine's sanctions list. AP added another explosive detail. Kafa was accused of transporting stolen grain. That turns a murky shipping story into a straight geopolitical one. From free passage to forced inspections. That was the first signal. The second came almost immediately. On March 12th, Swedish police and the Swedish Coast Guard boarded the 228-meter tanker Sea Owl 1 off Trelleborg. Again, the problem was not just where the ship had been, it was what it appeared to be. The ship was flying the Comoros flag, but Swedish authorities said they suspected it was not actually in the Comorian register and was therefore sailing under a false flag. The vessel was also on the EU sanctions list. The Swedish Coast Guard said its overall assessment was that the risk of safety deficiencies on board was high, that the vessel could not be allowed innocent passage, and that the threats to maritime safety and the environment were too high to ignore. Reuters reported that prosecutors were investigating the Russian captain on suspicions including the use of false documents and violations of Sweden's Maritime Act. According to the Coast Guard's own fact sheet, Sea Owl 1 had recently transported oil products between Russia and Brazil, was coming from Santos, and had Primorsk as its destination when Sweden intervened. First one ship, then another. Warnings turned into action. And that is what makes this important. Not one dramatic incident, a pattern, a sequence, a new habit of enforcement. You can picture the scene from the bridge. You watch the blue lights on the water. You hear the loudspeaker in a language that isn't yours. You look out at grey Swedish cutters and men in boarding gear climbing up steel ladders in the Baltic wind. Suddenly, this sea, which looked like a corridor, starts to feel like a funnel, then like a trap. Now, here is how Sweden is actually doing it. Not with a naval blockade, not with some grand speech about shutting the Baltic. Sweden is using law, maritime administration, intelligence, and physical presence. It starts with the paperwork. Is the flag genuine? Is the registration real? Is the vessel insured? Does it appear on sanctions lists? Is it linked to Russian ports? Does it pose a safety or environmental hazard? If too many of those answers start flashing red, Sweden now has more tools to scrutinize the ship and, in certain circumstances, intervene. The key is that this pressure is being built legally. It is boring on paper. It is dangerous at sea. Since July 1st, 2025, the Swedish Coast Guard has been allowed to request insurance information from vessels in Sweden's territorial sea and exclusive economic zone. Ships are not forced to answer, but the request itself creates a trail. A vessel suspected of belonging to the Shadow Fleet or heading to or from a Russian port is exactly the kind of ship that can trigger this scrutiny. Sweden says the point is civil maritime situational awareness, environmental protection, and safety at sea. But let's be honest about the strategic effect. The more data you demand, the harder it is to stay ghost-like. The more you force these ships to speak, the less invisible they become. And then there are the practical tools. Coast Guard cutters, helicopters, boarding teams, radio calls, port state-style inspections when vessels come close enough, maritime tracking databases, satellite monitoring of suspicious route changes, flag changes, and weird behaviour around choke points like the Danish Straits and the waters off southern Sweden. This is one of those stories where nothing looks cinematic on a PowerPoint slide until you remember that all of this ends with armed state personnel stepping onto the deck of a ship that thought it could bluff its way through Europe's front yard. Sweden is not trying to sink these tankers, it is trying to make them sweat. And in shipping, sweat is expensive. This is the moment the Baltic changes from a transit lane into a pressure zone. Because Russia depends on this shadow fleet for more than symbolism. It is a workaround for sanctions, a way to move crude and oil products outside the normal Western insurance and compliance ecosystem. Brookings noted in February 2026 that shadow fleet ships account for more than 60% of Russia's crude oil export volumes in the Baltic. That is enormous. That means if you make this fleet slower, riskier, more visible, and more vulnerable to detention or diversion, you are not just creating maritime headaches, you are reaching into the Kremlin's cash flow. Every seized tanker is one more cut in Russia's war chest. That is not just a slogan, it is economics. A delayed voyage means delayed payment. A boarded ship means legal exposure. A false flag exposed means insurers, ports, charterers, and buyers all have one more reason to stay away or demand a discount. Even when a ship is not permanently seized, time becomes a weapon. Routes get longer, captains get more cautious, middlemen demand bigger margins, freight rates rise, insurance costs climb, or the lack of credible insurance becomes its own flashing warning sign, and the discount on Russian oil gets a little uglier. This is not a blockade, it is a financial kill zone. The closer you get to Sweden's patch of sea, the more your profits bleed out in delays, inspections, and legal trouble. There is also the environmental angle, which is not decorative, it is central. The Baltic is not some wide, forgiving ocean where a spill disappears into infinity. It is crowded, shallow, and ecologically fragile. Sweden's Coast Guard explicitly said the threats to maritime safety and the environment were too high in the Sea Owl 1 case. Older tankers with dubious maintenance and questionable insurance are not just sanctions evaders, they are floating liability bombs. One bad engine room fire, one grounding, one collision in a narrow lane, and suddenly this stops being a sanctioned story and becomes a regional disaster. That gives Sweden a powerful legal and political argument. It is not just chasing Russia's money, it is defending its coast. That is the logistics. Now, here is the politics. Sweden joined NATO in 2024. Since then, one of the big questions has been what kind of member it wants to be. Quiet, cautious, and mostly symbolic, or active, sharp-edged, and ready to shape the Baltic security environment. These interventions answer that question in a pretty blunt way. Sweden is signaling that it is not just a new flag at alliance meetings. It is prepared to enforce the rules-based order in the waters that matter most to Northern Europe. It is also aligning itself with a broader regional squeeze. Denmark has been tightening its own pressure around the Baltic exits. Finland, Estonia, and others have been increasingly vocal about the shadow fleet, undersea infrastructure risks, and maritime grey zone threats. Sweden is not acting alone, but it is acting visibly, and visibility matters. This is where Moscow's irritation becomes the real story. Russia has called these kinds of seizures piracy. Of course it has. The Kremlin loves the grey zone when it is the one operating in it. Opaque ownership, deniable activity, dual-use infrastructure pressure, legal ambiguity, hybrid intimidation. It has played this game for years. What Sweden is doing now is not mirroring Russian behavior exactly. It is doing something more annoying from Moscow's point of view. It is using transparent law enforcement and allied coordination to make grey zone behavior less profitable. Same chessboard, different pieces. Much worse for the Kremlin. And there is another layer here that should worry Moscow. The EU's Shadow Fleet sanctions list has swollen dramatically. By late December 2025, Sweden said 598 vessels were subject to EU sanctions targeting the Shadow Fleet, while the Council described EU ports as closed to almost 600 non-EU vessels that are part of it. That means the enforcement pool is larger, the intelligence picture is deeper, and the number of hulls that can trigger suspicion is rising. A ship that might have slipped through in 2023 now has to worry about databases, sanction screens, insurance questions, and a Baltic coastline filled with countries that are much less patient than they used to be. So what comes next? The first thing to watch is whether more Baltic and North Sea states move from monitoring to intervention. The June 2025 joint statement by Sweden and its partners was already clear that falsely flagged and stateless vessels would face action within international law. If that doctrine becomes routine practice, then the Shadow Fleet's operating model in Northern Europe starts to rot from the edges inward. Not every ship will be boarded. It does not need to be. A few high-profile cases can do a lot of work. Shipping is a herd business. Once fear enters the herd, behavior changes fast. The second thing to watch is rerouting. If Baltic enforcement pressure rises, Russia will try to push more flows onto longer, more expensive paths. That can mean more reliance on distant transfers, more ships with even murkier ownership, more circuitous voyages, and more opportunities for things to go wrong. The irony is beautiful in a dry, maritime lawyer kind of way. The secret fleet only works when it can move quietly and cheaply. The moment it has to move loudly and expensively, the whole point starts to collapse. The third thing to watch is retaliation below the threshold of war. Could Russia answer with harassment near its own waters, pressure on Western shipping, cyber activity against ports, or more ugly games around undersea cables and maritime infrastructure? Absolutely. The Baltic is already a theatre of nerves, not just navies. And that is why Sweden's move matters beyond two ships. It tells Moscow that the Northern Europeans are no longer treating maritime grey zone threats as background noise. They are treating them as operational targets. This is the moment the paperwork becomes a weapon. Because that is what this really is. A story about forms, registries, radio calls, insurance data, boarding ladders, and a few very tense minutes on a cold deck off Trelleborg. It sounds almost too mundane for a war story. That is exactly why it matters. Modern conflict is full of glamorous headlines about missiles, drones, and satellites. But states also bleed through logistics, compliance, access, and confidence. A tanker turned back without a shot fired can matter more than a dramatic explosion on the front line, because one gets a headline for a day, and the other keeps cutting revenue month after month. No flags left to hide behind. From free passage to forced inspections, every seized tanker is one more cut in Russia's war chest. That is Sweden's message. Not loud, not theatrical, just cold and clear. The war in Ukraine is not only fought with tanks, drones, and artillery. It is fought with registries, Coast Guard cutters, sanctions lists, and hands placed very deliberately on the steel skin of ships that were never supposed to be touched. And in the Baltic Sea, Sweden just showed Putin something he really did not want to see. Even his secret fleet is not safe anymore.